The hot iron pressed against Rowan Ashford's forearm before she could pull away. The scent of burning flesh mingled with the cloying perfume that always clung to Vivian's Chambers jasmine and something darker. Something that smelled like rot beneath silk. She bit down on her tongue hard enough to taste copper. 4 years and 9 months had taught her this lesson well. Screaming only made it last longer. Giving the Luna satisfaction was a currency Rowan could no longer afford to spend. "Clumsy girl," Vivian said, her voice dripping with false concern as she lifted the heated metal rod from Rowan's skin. The Luna's reflection shimmered in the ornate mirror, golden hair cascading in perfect waves, ice blue eyes glittering with something cold and hungry. Beautiful, cruel, and utterly untouchable in her position as Luna of the Iron Peak Pack. "You really should be more careful when you're styling my hair. What if you had burned me instead?" Rowan kept her eyes downcast, amber gaze fixed on the polished stone floor. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to shift, and tear this monster's throat out with fangs she could no longer summon. But her wolf had been silent for 10 years, trapped behind walls of trauma that teenage grief had built and adult suffering had reinforced. "Forgive me, my lady." The burn on her arm throbbed in time with her heartbeat joining the constellation of scars that mapped 4 years and 9 months of torment across her skin. Burns in deliberate patterns, cuts that had healed poorly without proper care. The parallel lines left by leather whips used more times than she could count. "You're forgiven," Vivian purred, reaching back to pat Rowan's cheek with deceptive gentleness. Her fingers lingered just long enough to press against an old bruise fresh enough to still ache. "Just try not to disappoint me again." The words carried layers of threat that only Rowan could hear. To anyone else, Vivian Fairchild was the picture of grace, a Luna who embodied everything a pack could want in their alpha's mate. Poised, elegant, devoted to her people and her territory. But here alone in these chambers, where no witnesses could contradict her version of events, the mask slipped away to reveal the monster beneath. Rowan resumed her work with steady hands despite the fresh wound. Her fingers moved through the familiar motions of braiding and pinning, creating the elaborate style Vivian demanded for tonight's gathering. The Luna would descend those grand stairs looking radiant, would smile sweetly at Alpha Declan. When he returned from patrol, would charm the visiting dignitaries with her wit and warmth. And Rowan would remain invisible as she had learned to be. The memory came unbidden, as it often did in moments of pain. She was 14 again, crouched in the corner of a small homestead, while shadows moved through the darkness outside. The remote Idaho property had been her father's pride, far enough from pack politics to live quietly close enough to pack lands to claim protection if needed. That protection had failed them. Her mother's hand pressed against her mouth, muffling any sound. "Stay quiet, little wolf," she whispered, amber eyes, so like Rowan's own, bright with terror. "No matter what happens, you survive. Promise me." Rowan had nodded, tears streaming down her face as she made a promise she would spend the next 10 years keeping. The rogues had come in the deep hours before dawn, their scents wrong and wild, carrying the stench of madness and blood. Her father had shifted immediately, his brown wolf launching toward the door with a snarl that shook the rafters. Her mother had followed, white fur erupting across her skin as she joined her mate in desperate defense. Rowan had tried to shift for the first time that night, had felt her wolf surge forward, desperate to protect, to fight, to survive. But the sight of her father's throat being torn open, her mother's agonized howl as she fell, had shattered something fundamental inside her. The transformation had ceased halfway through pain, exploding through every nerve as her body tried and failed to complete the change. Her wolf had gotten stuck, trapped behind walls of fear and grief, too severe for a young mind to process. The rogues had left her there, thinking her just another human casualty, not worth the effort. She had lain among the bodies of her parents until dawn, her wolf trapped and screaming inside her, blocked by trauma too severe to overcome. For 3 days she had wandered half-mad with grief and hunger until she collapsed near the walls of Iron Peak territory. Agnes had found her. The old cook had been gathering herbs in the forest when she stumbled upon the girl's unconscious form. Most would have seen just another orphaned human, but Agnes's keen eyes had caught the amber tint in Rowan's eyes, had recognized the faint scent of wolf beneath the dirt and blood. "Poor lamb," Agnes had murmured, gathering Rowan into surprisingly strong arms. "What horrors have you seen?" The cook had smuggled her into the castle kitchens, had fed her broth and bread, had asked no questions, when Rowan remained silent for weeks. Eventually, the girl had spoken, had shared the truth in broken whispers. She had a wolf, but it was trapped inside her, unreachable. Broken. Best not to mention that to anyone, dear, Agnes had advised gently. Shifters who can't shift proper, well, they're treated worse than humans who never had a wolf at all. Safer for everyone to think you're just a foundling without the gift. So Rowan had become invisible. She worked in the kitchens for 6 years, silent, inefficient, learning to read the moods of the castle's inhabitants, learning to anticipate needs before they were spoken, learning to survive. She had been 20 when everything changed. It was the spring of her 6th year at Iron Peak when Alpha Declan had married Vivian Fairchild. The union had been political, everyone knew that. The Fairchild territory controlled valuable mountain passes and trade routes, and their alliance strengthened Iron Peak's position against rival packs to the east. The Alpha had done his duty as leaders always did. Vivian had arrived like a winter storm wrapped in silk and smiles, and within months, the castle staff had learned to tread carefully around her. But she saved her cruelest treatment for those who could not fight back, who had no power to challenge her. The incident that sealed Rowan's fate had been absurdly simple. Alpha Declan had returned early from a border patrol, striding into the kitchens, with dust on his boots and weariness in the set of his broad shoulders. His dark hair had been tied back, revealing the strong line of his jaw beneath his neat beard, and his gray eyes had swept the room with the natural authority of a leader assessing his domain. For 3 seconds, just 3, his gaze had landed on Rowan Brown as she bent over a cutting board. Their eyes had met, and something in his expression had shifted. Recognition, perhaps, or simply curiosity about the quiet kitchen girl with the unusual amber eyes. 3 heartbeats that had changed everything. Vivian had been standing in the doorway, had witnessed that brief exchange, and her pretty face had gone cold. The Luna had smiled at her husband, had taken his arm, with practiced grace, but her ice-blue eyes had found Rowan across the room. The next morning, Vivian had demanded that the girl with the odd eyes be reassigned as her personal attendant. That had been 4 years and 9 months ago. Agnes had tried to intervene once 3 years into Rowan's service. The old cook had gone to a trusted guard, had whispered concerns about the suspicious injuries that kept appearing on the Luna's attendant. The guard had vanished the next day, reassigned to a dangerous border post where rogues killed him within a week. A young servant girl who had been friendly with Rowan had disappeared entirely shortly after her body never found. The message had been clear: interfere, and people died. So Agnes had learned to offer what help she could in secret. Extra food hidden in Rowan's sleeping quarters. Healing salves left where she would find them. Silent companionship in the pre-dawn hours when Rowan's duties allowed her brief moments of respite. It was the only kindness Rowan knew in a world that had forgotten her. Rowan finished pinning the final braid into place and stepped back, waiting for inspection. Vivian turned her head left and right, studying her reflection with the critical eye of someone who knew her beauty was both weapon and armor. "Adequate work, I suppose," the Luna said finally. "Now fetch my sapphire gown, the one with the silver threading." "Yes, my lady." Rowan moved to the wardrobe, each step measured and careful. Her arms still burned where the iron had seared her skin, but she had learned long ago how to function through pain, how to hide the trembling in her hands, the tears that threatened when the abuse became too much to bear. Inside her chest, something stirred. Her wolf, trapped and silent for 10 years, pressed against the cage of her trauma. It howled soundlessly, desperate for freedom, yearning to break through the barriers that kept it chained. But Rowan pushed it down as she always did. The world had no place for broken shifters. No mercy for those who couldn't complete their transformation. Better to be thought human and powerless than to reveal her defect and face worse scorn. She had made a promise to her mother all those years ago in the darkness. Survive no matter the bond, so she would endure another night, another day, another year if necessary. She pulled the sapphire gown from its hanger and turned back to her tormentor, carefully blank expression firmly in place. Vivian was already humming, pleased with herself, anticipating the evening ahead, where she would shine as the perfect Luna, while her husband remained blind to the monster he had married. And Rowan would be there, invisible in the shadows, bearing her scars in silence. The drums of war had finally silenced along the northern border, leaving Declan Stone with nothing but the weight of victory and the hollowness that always followed battle. 3 weeks ahead of schedule, he guided his warriors back through the mountain passes toward home, eager to wash the stench of death from his skin and sleep in his own bed for the first time in months. The setting sun painted the stone walls of Iron Peak in shades of amber and gold as they approached. Beautiful, he supposed, though beauty had become a foreign concept during 5 years of a marriage that felt more like a political contract than a union of souls. Vivian would be there playing the dutiful Luna, and he would play the returning hero. They had both become exceptional actors. The courtyard erupted with activity as his warriors dismounted. Stable hands rushed forward to tend horses. Pack members gathered to welcome their alpha home relief, evident in their faces that the northern threat had been neutralized without catastrophic losses. Declan accepted their gratitude with the practiced ease of long leadership, but his mind was already drifting towards simpler pleasures. A hot bath, a proper meal that didn't taste of travel rations and smoke. Perhaps a walk through his territory to remind himself what he'd been fighting to protect. He strode toward the castle entrance, Brennan falling into step beside him. His beta had been his war brother for 15 years, had stood at his side through battles that would have broken lesser men. If anyone understood the bone-deep weariness that came with the command, it was Brennan. The Luna organized a feast for tonight, Brennan said, his tone carefully neutral, visiting dignitaries from 3 neighboring territories. She's been planning it for weeks. Declan's jaw tightened. Of course she had. Vivian excelled at political theater, at maintaining the alliances that kept Iron Peak strong. It was one of the reasons he'd agreed to the marriage in the first place, despite the cold absence of affection between them. I'll need to clean up first. Tell her I'll be down within the hour. Already done, Alpha. They parted ways at the main corridor, Brennan heading toward the guard stations to oversee the warriors' return to regular duties, while Declan turned toward the residential wing. But hunger gnawed at him, the kind that came from months of inadequate field rations, and his path detoured through the kitchens. The familiar warmth hit him first, along with the scent of bread baking and meat roasting. Agnes presided over her domain with the same authority Declan wielded over his territory, and she looked up from a pot she was stirring to offer him a genuine smile. Alpha Declan back early and in one piece by the look of it. Sit yourself down and I'll get you something proper to eat. Just something quick, Agnes. I need to. His words died as his eyes swept the kitchen and landed on a figure bent over a cutting board near the back wall. The girl had dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, revealing the elegant line of her neck. She moved with quiet efficiency, dicing vegetables with practiced precision. Something about her posture spoke of careful invisibility, of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Then she looked up and their eyes met. Amber. Unusual and striking, the color of honey catching sunlight. For 3 seconds, just 3, Declan found himself caught in that gaze, and something fundamental shifted inside his chest. His wolf surged forward with unexpected violence. Mine, it snarled with absolute certainty. Protect. Claim. Mine. The force of the reaction shocked him. Declan had been married for 5 years, had bedded his wife with dutiful regularity, had never felt anything like this visceral recognition. His wolf had acknowledged Vivian as Luna because duty demanded it, but this was different. This was primal. The girl's amber eyes widened slightly, and Declan caught a flash of something in her expression, fear mixed with confusion, as if she recognized the intensity of his stare but couldn't understand it. Then she lowered her gaze, quickly returning to her work with deliberate focus. Alpha, Agnes's voice broke the spell. Declan dragged his attention back to the old cook, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Concern, worry. Who is she? Rowan Alpha. She works in the kitchens. Has for years now. Years. She'd been here for years, and he'd never noticed her. Never caught that unusual eye color. Never scented the faint trace of something that whispered wolf despite her human appearance. I didn't realize we had new staff. Not so new, Alpha. But she keeps to herself mostly. Quiet girl, good worker. Agnes's tone carried a subtle warning that Declan's wolf was too agitated to properly interpret. He nodded absently, accepted the plate of bread and cheese she pressed into his hands, and forced himself to leave the kitchens without looking back at the girl with amber eyes. But his wolf prowled restlessly beneath his skin, demanding he return, demanding he investigate this stranger who had triggered such an unprecedented reaction. He was halfway to his chambers when he realized he'd been holding his breath. Vivian stood in the doorway to the kitchens, her fingers gripping her husband's arm with practiced affection. But her ice blue eyes had tracked the brief exchange between Declan and that girl, had witnessed the way his expression shifted, the way his entire body language changed for those 3 seconds. She knew that look, had seen it in the eyes of true mated pairs and couples who had found their soul's counterpart among thousands of eligible wolves. Her husband, her political prize, her ticket to power, had just looked at a kitchen servant with recognition. Unacceptable. Vivian's smile never wavered as she guided Declan away, chatting about the evening's arrangements with the easy charm that had made her such an effective Luna. But inside, cold calculation took over. The girl would need to be dealt with, thoroughly, permanently if necessary, but first she would need to be broken. That night, long after the feast had ended and the dignitaries had retired to their quarters, Vivian summoned Rowan to her chambers. The girl arrived with downcast eyes, as she always did, and Vivian felt a surge of satisfaction at the sight. This was how it should be: powerful, standing over powerless beauty, dominating plainness, Luna commanding servant. "You made an impression on the Alpha today," Vivian said softly, circling Rowan like a predator assessing prey. "In the kitchens. He noticed you." "I'm sorry, my lady. I didn't mean—" "Silence." The word cracked through the air like a whip. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I didn't see the way he looked at you?" Rowan's hands trembled at her sides. "It was nothing, my lady. Just 3 seconds. He barely even— 3 seconds is all it takes for a wolf to recognize a mate bond." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Rowan's face went pale, her amber eyes widening with genuine shock. "No," she whispered. "That's not— I don't have a wolf. I can't be— You have one. I can smell it on you, even if it's too broken to surface." Vivian's smile turned cruel. "Agnes thinks she's so clever hiding you among the humans. But I've known what you are since the day you became my attendant. A defective shifter, a broken thing pretending to be normal." Rowan stood frozen, years of carefully maintained secrecy crumbling in an instant. And now, Vivian continued, reaching for the leather whip she kept hidden in her wardrobe. "You've made the mistake of catching my husband's attention. That makes you a threat, and I eliminate threats." The first strike caught Rowan across the shoulders, tearing through her thin dress and splitting skin. She gasped, more from shock than pain. Vivian had never been this brazen before, this careless about leaving marks that might be seen. The Luna was losing control, and that terrified Rowan more than the beating itself. The second strike landed across her back. The third wrapped around her ribs, stealing her breath. And something inside Rowan, something that had been dormant and compliant for 4 years and 9 months, finally snapped. Her hand shot out instinctively, catching Vivian's wrist mid-swing. For one breathless moment, they stared at each other. The Luna shocked that her victim had dared to fight back, and Rowan equally stunned by her own audacity. "Let go of me!" Vivian snarled, her beautiful face twisted with rage. Instead, Rowan pushed. Not hard, not violently, but enough to break free of the Luna's grip. Enough to make Vivian stumble backward. And Vivian, ever the actress, let herself fall. The Luna hit the floor with a theatrical cry, one hand flying to her head as if she'd been struck. The whip landed perfectly in Rowan's trembling fingers, placed there by Vivian's quick movements, though any observer would swear the servant had been wielding it all along. "Guards!" Vivian's scream carried through the castle halls, pitched to sound terrified and desperate. "Help! She's attacking me!" Heavy boots thundered up the stairs. The door burst open, revealing 3 guards with weapons drawn. Their eyes swept the scene, their Luna on the floor, tears streaming down her perfect face, a visible red mark blooming on her cheek where she'd scratched herself during the fall, and Rowan standing over her with the whip still clutched in her hand and blood dripping down her back. "Seize her," the lead guard commanded. Rowan didn't fight as rough hands grabbed her arms. What would be the point? The evidence was clear, the story already written. She had attacked the Luna, that's what everyone would believe, what the law would recognize. And the punishment for such a crime was death. As they dragged her toward the dungeons, Rowan caught a glimpse of Agnes in the corridor. The old cook's face had gone pale, her weathered hands pressed to her mouth in horror. Their eyes met for one brief moment, and Rowan tried to convey everything she couldn't say aloud. "Thank you for your kindness. Don't intervene. Save yourself." Then the darkness of the dungeon stairs swallowed her whole, and Rowan wondered if she would live long enough to see another dawn. Inside her chest, her wolf howled with desperate grief, a sound only she could hear, trapped, as it had been since the night her parents were murdered. She pressed her palm against her heart, feeling the creature thrash against its cage of trauma and fear. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness, uncertain whether she was apologizing to her parents, her wolf, or herself. "I tried to survive. I really tried." But survival, she was learning, had its limits, and hers had just been reached. The dungeon cell was dark, lit only by a single torch that cast dancing shadows across damp stone walls. Rowan sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, and waited for dawn to bring her execution. Pack law was absolute in matters like this. A servant raising a hand against the Luna, regardless of provocation, regardless of circumstance, faced immediate death. No trial, no appeal, no mercy. It was one of the oldest laws, designed to protect pack leadership from those who might abuse their positions of service. The irony wasn't lost on her. She traced the fresh burn on her forearm with gentle fingers, adding it to the mental catalog of scars she carried. This would be the last one Vivian ever gave her. That thought should have brought comfort, but Rowan found only hollow resignation. 10 years ago, she'd promised her mother she would survive. She'd kept that promise through grief and starvation, through loneliness and abuse. But some promises, she was learning, couldn't be kept forever. Her wolf stirred inside her chest, restless, agitated, pressing against barriers that had held for a decade. The creature had been quiet for so long that its sudden activity felt strange, almost foreign. "Mine," it whispered in a voice she barely recognized. "Alpha. Mate. Protect." Rowan closed her eyes against tears that threatened to fall. Her broken wolf had chosen the worst possible time to develop opinions about the alpha whose 3-second glance had sealed her fate. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. She lifted her head as the cell door swung open, expecting guards come to drag her to the execution grounds. Instead, Alpha Declan filled the doorway, torch in hand, his gray eyes shadowed with something she couldn't read. "Stand up," he commanded, his alpha voice carrying automatic authority that made her body obey before her mind could question. Rowan rose slowly, each movement stiff with obvious pain. Her torn dress clung to wounds that hadn't been treated, and she was acutely aware of how she must look: filthy, bloodied, condemned. But Declan's eyes weren't focused on her face. His gaze had dropped to her exposed arms, where years of scars lay visible in the flickering torchlight, burns in distinct patterns, cuts that had healed poorly. The evidence of systematic abuse written across her skin in a language any shifter could read. "Show me your back," he said, his voice rougher than before. "All of it." Rowan hesitated, shame and fear warring in her chest, but disobedience at this point seemed pointless. She turned and let the ruined dress fall forward, exposing skin marked by years of calculated cruelty. Fresh welts from tonight's beating crossed over older scars. Burn marks formed deliberate patterns, not random injuries, but calculated pain, inflicted over months and years. The distinctive parallel lines left by a whip used more times than anyone could count. Behind her, she heard Declan's sharp intake of breath. Then came the snarl. It started low, building in his chest like distant thunder before erupting into something primal and violent. The sound shook the cell walls, echoed through the dungeon corridors, carried the weight of an alpha's rage barely leashed. Rowan spun around her back, hitting the cold stone wall arms coming up to shield her head in a gesture that spoke of long conditioning. She expected violence from figures of authority, expected pain from those with power. Declan's eyes had gone pure gold, his wolf surging forward, fighting for dominance, desperate to break free and tear apart whoever had done this. His hands were clenched into fists, claws extending from his fingertips. Every line of his body screamed barely controlled fury. "You're safe now," he murmured, pulling her close against his chest. "It's over. She can never touch you again." Rowan peeked at him through her raised arms, trembling violently. This was the alpha she'd feared since childhood, the apex predator, the unstoppable force, the warrior who could kill without mercy. And he was losing control right in front of her. But slowly, painfully, Declan wrestled his wolf into submission. The gold faded from his eyes, though they remained storm gray and intense. His breathing steadied. The claws retracted. "Tell me everything," he said softly, making his voice as gentle as he knew how. "From the beginning, and this time I'll listen." So Rowan told him. She spoke of 4 years and 9 months of systematic torture, of burns and cuts, and beatings that came whenever Vivian felt threatened or bored or simply cruel. She described how the Luna's mask never slipped in public, how witnesses were silenced through threats or disappearances, how isolation had become her only protection against worse abuse. She saw you look at me once, Rowan said, her voice hollow with exhausted honesty. Just once in the kitchens, for maybe 3 seconds, and she decided I was a threat that needed to be broken. Declan's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. Why didn't you report this? Surely someone... Agnes tried once, 3 years ago. Rowan's fingers dug into her arms. The guard she spoke to was transferred to the most dangerous border post the next day. He was killed by rogues within a week. A servant girl who'd shown me kindness disappeared that same night. The message was clear: speak up and people die. The words hung heavy between them. Declan had suspected his Luna was cold, calculating, more interested in power than partnership. But this level of systematic cruelty spoke to something darker than mere political ambition. There's something else, Rowan added, her voice dropping even lower. Something I've never told anyone except Agnes, and she only knows because she found me when I first came here. Declan waited, sensing they were approaching the heart of whatever mystery surrounded this girl. I'm not human, Rowan said. I have a wolf. I've always had one. But it's been trapped inside me since I was 14 years old, since the night rogues murdered my parents, and I watched them die. The confession spilled out: the Idaho homestead, the desperate defense, the transformation that seized halfway through. Her wolf trapped behind walls of trauma, unreachable for 10 years, despite everything she tried. A shifter with a blocked wolf, Declan said slowly, understanding dawning. That changes everything. Does it? Rowan's laugh was bitter. I'm still broken, still defective. Pack law might give me slightly more rights than a human, but not enough to save my life after attacking the Luna. You didn't attack her. You defended yourself. Declan's voice carried absolute certainty. And if I can prove the pattern of abuse, then pack law becomes far more complicated. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. I'm ordering a healer to examine you before dawn. Full documentation of every injury, every scar. And Rowan, his gray eyes met her amber ones, holding her gaze with intensity that made her wolf stir again. If you're lying to me about any of this, I will know. And your death will be far less merciful than the quick end the law prescribes. I'm not lying, Alpha, she said softly. I've done many things to survive, but lying has never served me well. After he left, Rowan finally allowed herself to break. Tears she'd held back for years spilled down her cheeks as she curled into herself, trembling with pain and exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. Tomorrow she would die. But tonight, someone had finally seen her scars. Brennan descended the dungeon stairs an hour before dawn, carrying a torch and the weight of 15 years serving the Iron Peak pack. He'd been Declan's beta long enough to develop instincts about when something didn't add up. And tonight, nothing about the situation felt right. The girl sat exactly where Declan had left her, knees drawn to her chest, amber eyes reflecting the torchlight when she looked up. She didn't flinch at his approach, didn't scramble backward or plead for mercy. Just watched him with the wary stillness of someone who had learned long ago that begging accomplished nothing. The Alpha ordered a healer to examine you, Brennan said, unlocking the cell door. But I wanted to speak with you first. Off the record. Rowan tilted her head slightly. Why? Because I've been beta to this pack long enough to recognize when evidence doesn't match the crime. He stepped inside, keeping his distance to avoid spooking her. Your injuries are extensive and old, the Lunas are superficial and fresh, yet you're the one facing execution. That's how the law works, Rowan said quietly. Servants don't strike their betters, regardless of provocation. Provocation. Brennan crouched down to her eye level, studying the marks visible on her arms in the firelight. Tell me about these scars, the old ones. For a long moment she said nothing, then so softly he almost missed it. What does it matter? I'll be dead by morning anyway. It matters because I've served this pack since before you were born. Girl, and I've never known Alpha Declan to execute someone without being certain of their guilt. He's ordered the healer to document your injuries. That's not standard procedure. That's an Alpha looking for reasons to question his own judgment. Something flickered in Rowan's expression, hope perhaps, or simply disbelief that anyone in power might actually care about the truth. If I tell you, she whispered, and nothing changes, then I've betrayed my silence for nothing. But if I stay quiet, then I die having never spoken my truth. She looked up at him in amber eyes bright with unshed tears. Which way leads to less regret, Beta Brennan? The truth always leads to less regret even when it hurts. So Rowan told him everything she'd told Declan and more besides. She spoke of isolation, of hunger, of psychological torture that left no visible marks but cut deeper than any blade. She described Vivian's methods, always careful, always calculated, always leaving just enough ambiguity to avoid outright accusation. "Why didn't you run?" Brennan asked when she finished. "Where would I go? I have no family, no allies, no territory to claim. A lone shifter, especially a broken one, wouldn't last a week outside pack protection." Rowan's voice held the flat certainty of someone who'd considered every option and found them all wanting. "At least here I had Agnes. At least here I knew the rules of my cage." Brennan's jaw clenched. Everything she said aligned with what Declan had reported, and his instincts screamed that she was telling the truth. But instinct wasn't evidence, and evidence was what they needed to challenge a Luna backed by one of the most powerful families in the Northern Territories. "There's something else you should know," Brennan said carefully. "Alpha Thaddeus Fairchild sent an ultimatum. 5 days to execute you or pay substantial blood money for the insult to his daughter. If we refuse both, he'll sever trade agreements and withdraw military support." Rowan's face went pale. "Then you have no choice. You can't risk war for a broken servant." "That's not your decision to make." Brennan stood, his expression grim. "The Alpha will do what honor demands. And right now, honor demands we find the truth regardless of political consequences." He left the cell and immediately sought out others who'd worked near the Luna's chambers. The late hour worked in his favor. Tired servants were more likely to speak honestly, less afraid when darkness provided cover. A young maid admitted she'd seen Rowan appear with fresh injuries multiple times. "But we were told the girl was clumsy, my lord. Accidents happen in service." An older steward reluctantly confirmed that food orders for the Luna's chambers never included portions for the personal attendant, despite custom dictating that servants ate when their mistresses did. "I thought it strange, but it wasn't my place to question the Luna's household management." And then there was Agnes. Brennan found the old cook in her kitchen, grinding herbs with mechanical precision, though her weathered face was pale with distress. "You know about the girl in the dungeons," Brennan said. It wasn't a question. Agnes's hand stilled. "Rowan, her name is Rowan. Tell me what you know." The story that emerged painted a picture of sustained abuse that made Brennan's wolf snarl with protective rage. Agnes had found Rowan a decade ago, half dead from grief and trauma, and had given the orphaned girl sanctuary. She'd watched helplessly as Vivian systematically destroyed that same girl over years of service. "I tried to help once," Agnes whispered, tears tracking down her lined cheeks. "But the Luna made it clear interfere and more people would suffer. So I stayed silent and hated myself for it." "That ends tonight," Brennan promised. The healer arrived as the first gray light of pre-dawn began to filter through the high dungeon windows. She was an older woman named Meredith, skilled in both medicine and the subtle energies that govern shifter physiology. Her examination of Rowan was thorough and conducted in tense silence while Brennan watched from the cell entrance. "Well," he demanded when she finally stepped back. Meredith's expression was grim. "The physical injuries are extensive and show clear patterns of repeated trauma over years. Burns cuts evidence of malnutrition and systematic abuse." She paused, then added quietly, "And there's something else. This girl has a wolf." Rowan's eyes widened in shock, as if even she hadn't quite believed it would be detectable. "The wolf is blocked," Meredith continued, "trapped behind severe psychological trauma. But it's there, strong and vital, pressing against barriers this girl erected to protect herself from pain she couldn't process." She turned to Brennan, her voice firm. "She is absolutely a shifter, Beta, just one who's been unable to complete her transformation." Everything changed in that moment. Pack law was absolute about one thing: shifters had rights that humans did not. Rowan wasn't just a servant who'd attacked the Luna. She was a pack member with a confirmed wolf, entitled to proper investigation and the possibility of trial if she chose to challenge her accuser. Brennan wasted no time. He gathered his evidence, the testimonies, the healer's findings, the documentation of Rowan's injuries, and carried it directly to Declan's chambers as the sun broke over the mountains. The Alpha was already awake, staring out his window, with the look of a man who'd spent the night wrestling with impossible decisions. He turned as Brennan entered, and his gray eyes were stormy with barely contained emotion. "Tell me you found something," Declan said. "Tell me there's a reason to question what seems obvious." "There are dozens of reasons, Alpha." Brennan laid out everything he'd discovered, watching his friend's expression darken with each revelation. "The girl has been tortured for years. Multiple witnesses confirm it. And the healer has confirmed she's a shifter with a blocked wolf, which means she has legal rights we cannot ignore." Declan's hands clenched into fists. "Bring her to my private chambers. Not the audience hall. I want no witnesses to this conversation until I understand exactly what's happening in my own territory." When Rowan was brought before him an hour later, washed and dressed in clean clothes, but still bearing the evidence of her injuries, Declan forced himself to truly see her. Not as a servant, not as an accused criminal, but as a person who might have been failed by everyone around her, including him. "Show me," he commanded, his voice rough. "Show me everything the Luna did to you." Rowan hesitated, shame warring with self-preservation in her amber eyes. But she obeyed, removing the simple tunic she'd been given to reveal skin marked by years of calculated cruelty. Fresh welts from the previous night's beating crossed over old scars. Burn patterns that spoke of hot irons deliberately pressed to flesh. Cuts that had been inflicted with precision rather than passion. The evidence of torture that had been methodical and sustained. Declan's wolf surged forward with a snarl that rattled his ribcage. The sound escaped his throat involuntarily, a low, threatening growl that spoke of violence barely leashed. His eyes flashed gold as the beast fought for dominance, desperate to protect this girl who carried wounds that made even a hardened warrior want to tear someone apart. Rowan stumbled backward, her amber eyes going wide with pure terror. She hit the wall and slid down, arms coming up to shield her head in a gesture that spoke of long conditioning. She expected violence from figures of authority, expected pain from those with power. That broke something in Declan's chest. "You're safe now, sus," he murmured, his voice gentle despite the fury still coursing through him. "Look at me, Rowan. She can never touch you again." She peeked at him through her arms, trembling, and Declan saw what he should have seen years ago, a victim who'd survived through silence, who'd learned that submission was the only path to staying alive. "You're not going to die today," he said firmly. "The execution is canceled. You're being placed under protective custody while I investigate these claims fully. That's not a request, it's an order. But the Luna is going to answer some very difficult questions, and she's going to do it without knowing you're the one who provided testimony." Declan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "As far as she'll know, this is standard procedure following an incident involving pack members with confirmed wolves." Rowan stared at him, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. "You believe me?" "Yes." The word came out with absolute certainty. "I've seen enough evidence to know you're telling the truth. What I don't know yet is the full extent of what's been happening in my own territory while I've been blind to it." He called for Brennan, who arrived within moments. "Take her to the guest quarters in the East Wing. The comfortable ones, not the cells. Post guards at her door, but make it clear they're there for her protection, not imprisonment. She's to be treated as an honored guest." "Yes, Alpha." Brennan's expression showed approval of the decision. "And Brennan sends scouts to the Fairchild territory. I want to know if there are other former attendants who might have fled. If Vivian has done this before, there will be a pattern. Find it." 3 days passed in careful investigation. Declan moved through his duties with mechanical efficiency, maintaining the facade of normalcy, while his mind churned with fury and strategic calculation. Vivian played her role perfectly. The concerned Luna worried about the dangerous servant who'd attacked her, trusting in her husband's judgment to deliver appropriate justice. If she suspected the investigation had expanded beyond routine procedure, she gave no sign. On the 4th day, Brennan's scout returned. The woman who entered Declan's study moved with the wary caution of someone who'd spent years looking over her shoulder. She introduced herself as Juliet, and her story made Declan's blood run cold. "I served Lady Vivian for 8 months before I ran," she said, hands trembling around the cup of tea Agnes had prepared. "She was meticulous in her cruelty. Never left marks that would show in public, always had explanations ready for any injury someone might notice." Her voice cracked. "The burns were her favorite. She said they taught proper respect." Brennan recorded every word while Declan listened, his rage building with each detail that mirrored Rowan's testimony. When Juliet finished, he had her account formally witnessed by trusted guards. Combined with the previous evidence, the pattern was undeniable. But Vivian was Alpha Thaddeus Fairchild's only daughter. Accusing her publicly without ironclad proof and careful political maneuvering could spark war between territories. Declan needed to be strategic, even when every instinct screamed at him to drag his wife before the pack and expose her crimes immediately. "We need to force her hand," he told Brennan that evening. "Make her desperate enough to act recklessly, give us undeniable proof of her true nature." "What did you have in mind?" "A public council hearing, full pack attendance. We'll frame it as standard procedure for incidents involving shifters with confirmed wolves, but Vivian will see it as a threat. And when people feel threatened," Declan's smile was cold, "they make mistakes." But what Declan didn't know was that Vivian had already discovered fragments of his investigation. Her network of informants had finally pieced together enough to realize she was in danger. The spy she'd planted among the servants had reported his frequent visits to Rowan, the testimony gathering the scout who'd returned from Fairchild territory with a former attendant. She stood in her chambers, now staring at her reflection in the mirror, her mind racing through possibilities. Running would admit guilt. Denial wouldn't work if he had actual evidence. But there was one option that might salvage everything: turn herself into the victim one final time. The poison she'd acquired from a traveling merchant sat in a small vial on her dressing table, just enough to make her violently ill without killing her, combined with the antidote she'd taken an hour ago. If she collapsed during the council meeting, if she could frame it as Rowan's final revenge from her cell, then all of Declan's evidence would mean nothing against the immediate proof of attempted murder. She smiled at her reflection, ice-blue eyes calculating. She'd played this game for 5 years. One more performance wouldn't be difficult. The night before the scheduled council meeting, disaster struck from an unexpected direction. Rowan woke at 2 in the morning to a sensation she'd never experienced before, for a wrongness in the air, a prickling awareness that danger approached. Her newly awakened wolf sensed it first: hostile, intent, multiple sources moving toward the castle with purpose. She was out of bed and racing through corridors before conscious thought or he caught up her bare feet, silent on cold stone. The guards posted outside her door called after her, but she ignored them, following instinct toward the Alpha's chambers. "Alpha!" She burst through his door without knocking, finding him already half awake, responding to some instinct of his own. "There are intruders, at least 8, maybe more, coming from the east wall. They mean harm." Declan didn't question how she knew. He simply acted, sending out the mental call that would rouse his warriors, pulling on weapons with speed born of experience. Within minutes, the castle defense mobilized. Brennan appeared at his side, already armed and alert. "How do we know this isn't a false alarm?" "She knows," Declan said with absolute certainty, his eyes finding Rowan's across the room. "Her gift doesn't lie." The attack came exactly as Rowan had warned. 8 mercenaries, well-armed, well-trained, and moving with the coordination of professional killers, had infiltrated farther than they should have been able to. They'd bypassed outer defenses through a combination of skill and inside knowledge, heading directly for the residential wing where pack families slept. But Rowan's warning had given Declan's forces just enough time to intercept. The battle was brief and brutal. Brennan led defensive formations with tactical precision, directing warriors to protect vulnerable areas, while Declan himself engaged the mercenary leader in savage combat. Steel rang against steel in narrow corridors. Wolves snarled and clashed, fur matted with blood. The clash echoed through castle halls, punctuated by screams that woke the entire pack. Rowan watched from the shadows, her wolf pressing against barriers that suddenly felt thinner, more permeable. The creature wanted out, wanted to fight, wanted to protect the Alpha who'd shown her kindness when no one else would. "Not yet," she whispered to it. "Soon, but not yet." The mercenary leader was a brute of a man, scarred and experienced, fighting with the desperation of someone who knew capture meant death. He wielded twin blades with deadly efficiency, driving Declan back step by step through sheer ferocity. But Declan Stone hadn't survived 15 years of warfare by being predictable. He feinted left, drew the mercenary's guard high, then swept low with a move that sent both blades clattering across stone. Before the man could recover, Declan's hand closed around his throat, lifting him off his feet with alpha strength. "Who hired you?" Declan's voice was death itself. The mercenary spat blood. "Go to hell, wolf." Declan's claws extended, piercing flesh. Wrong answer. "Fairchild," the man gasped. "Fairchild Gold. Said eliminate the girl before trial. No witnesses, no problem." Declan's eyes flashed pure gold. With a single brutal motion, he snapped the mercenary's neck and let the body drop. The fight ended with 6 mercenaries dead and 2 captured alive. As dawn broke over the mountains, Declan stood before his assembled warriors, blood still on his hands, fury still bright in his eyes, and had the survivors dragged forward for formal interrogation. Under pressure from Brennan's skilled questioning and the threat of Alpha Command, the truth emerged in broken confessions. They'd been hired by someone in the Fairchild family to eliminate Rowan before she could testify. Whether Vivian had arranged it directly or her relatives had acted independently didn't matter. The intent was clear. Pack members gathered in the courtyard as the prisoners were secured, their voices buzzing with questions and fear. Then someone noticed Rowan standing beside the Alpha, her amber eyes still carrying flecks of gold from her wolf's near emergence, her posture no longer submissive but straight, with quiet confidence. "She saved us," a young guard announced, his voice carrying across the crowd. "She sensed them coming before any of us knew. That gift of hers, it's real. She protected the pack." Murmurs spread through the assembled shifters. The girl they dismissed as a broken servant had proven herself more valuable than any of them could have imagined. Respect grudging, but real, replaced the pity and dismissal they'd shown before. Declan raised his hand for silence, and the pack obeyed instantly. "Rowan Ashford has proven herself tonight," he declared, his alpha voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. "She carries warrior spirit and gifts that saved lives. She is pack, not servant, and anyone who questions that will answer to me." He turned to her, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. In Rowan's amber eyes he saw strength forged through suffering, courage earned through survival. And in his gray gaze she saw something she'd never expected to find: protection, freely given, respect, honestly earned. Her wolf hummed with contentment, recognizing what she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Mine, it whispered with certainty. Alpha. Mate. Home. Declan continued his investigation with renewed urgency. The mercenary attack had been the final piece of evidence he needed, undeniable proof that Vivian or her family were willing to kill to silence Rowan. Combined with the testimonies, the medical documentation, and Juliet's account, he now had enough to force a confrontation. But he needed to do it carefully, publicly, with witnesses who couldn't be silenced or dismissed. He spent the next 2 days preparing, consulting with the council elders about the proper procedures for challenging Aluna's fitness to serve. The law was ancient and rarely invoked, but it existed for precisely this situation, when Aluna violated the sacred codes that govern pack leadership. Meanwhile, he visited Rowan daily in her guest quarters, ostensibly to discuss the investigation, but truthfully because his wolf demanded her presence. They talked for hours about her parents, about his years of lonely leadership, about the weight of duty and the cost of survival. "Why are you helping me?" she asked one evening as they sat by the window watching the sun set over the mountains. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Declan said quietly. "I know you survived years of torture without breaking. I know you risked everything to warn us about the attack. I know my wolf recognized yours the moment our eyes met, even though you couldn't shift." Rowan's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means you're my mate, Rowan, true mate. The bond my kind searches lifetimes to find." He turned to face her fully. "But I won't claim you until you're truly free, free from Vivian's shadow, free from fear, free to choose for yourself what you want." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be free. I've been in cages so long, I don't remember what it feels like to just exist without fear. And then we'll learn together." Declan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her face. One day at a time, no pressure, no obligation, just possibility. For the first time in 10 years, Rowan believed survival might mean more than just enduring another day. It might mean actually living. The great hall filled as evening approached, torches casting flickering light across stone walls that had witnessed pack justice for generations. Council members took their positions at the high table, while shifters crowded into every available space drawn by rumors of unprecedented proceedings. Declan stood at the center of it all, his presence commanding instant silence. 5 years of marriage to a woman he thought merely cold had taught him patience. But patience had limits, and his had been exhausted the moment he had seen Rowan's scars. Vivienne made her entrance with perfect timing, dressed in sapphire silk that matched her eyes, golden hair arranged in elaborate braids. She moved through the crowd, accepting sympathies for her ordeal, playing the brave Luna who'd survived an attack by a deranged servant. But Declan noted the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her ice-blue eyes darted to the guards positioned throughout the hall, his most loyal warriors chosen specifically for tonight. She suspected something, even if she didn't know the full extent of what was coming. "My lords, my ladies," Declan's voice rang out across the hall, instantly commanding attention. "We gather tonight to address serious matters regarding pack law and the responsibilities of leadership." Vivian took her seat at his side, the picture of composed nobility. But Declan caught the way her fingers tightened on the arms of her chair, the slight quickening of her pulse that even careful control couldn't quite hide. "3 weeks ago, an incident occurred that seemed straightforward," he continued. "My Luna was allegedly attacked by her personal attendant. Pack law regarding such crimes is clear. But what appeared simple has revealed corruption that threatens the foundation of our territory." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Vivienne's face remained serene, but Declan saw the flash of calculation in her ice-blue eyes. "I have spent these weeks investigating not just the incident, but the pattern of behavior that led to it. What I discovered demands justice." He gestured to Brennan, who stepped forward with documentation. Testimony from multiple witnesses, medical evidence, accounts from previous attendants, all painting a picture of systematic abuse spanning years. "Alpha, surely you're not suggesting—" Vivian began, her voice carrying perfect confusion and hurt. "I'm not suggesting. I'm stating facts backed by evidence that will be presented to this council for formal judgment." Declan's gray eyes were cold as winter stone. "But first I invoke my right to question the accused directly." Vivian's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of something dark and desperate in her eyes, before she schooled her expression back to innocent bewilderment. "Accused Declan, what is this really about? Is it her?" Her voice dropped to something wounded and vulnerable. "The servant girl, you've been visiting her daily. The whole castle knows. Is this some elaborate excuse to what, expose a monster wearing my wife's face?" Declan leaned forward. "Tell me, Vivian, how many of your personal attendants have disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances? The council has those numbers. Would you like me to share them?" The hall went utterly silent. Vivian's hand moved toward her goblet of wine, the one she'd personally prepared before sitting down, the one laced with poison that would make her collapse in seeming proof of the servant's continued vendetta. But before she could drink, Declan continued, "I should also mention that I've had guards watching you constantly for the past week. Every movement, every conversation, every meal preparation." Vivian froze the goblet halfway to her lips. "Drink," Declan commanded with alpha authority that made even the strongest wolves in the room shift uncomfortably. "If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear from wine you poured yourself." She set the goblet down carefully. "I'm simply not thirsty." "Then you won't mind if we have it tested." He nodded to a guard who stepped forward and took the cup, along with checking your chambers for whatever antidote you took earlier. The color drained from Vivian's face. Around them, pack members whispered in shock and confusion, trying to understand what was unfolding. "You set a trap," she whispered, true fear showing now. "I prepared for the only move you had left." "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate you'd try to poison yourself and blame Rowan one final time?" Declan stood, his presence filling the hall. "Guards witnessed you adding something to that wine. The healer will confirm it's poison, and will find the antidote in your chambers, purchased from a merchant whose records show you acquired both substances 2 days ago." A council elder rose, his expression grave. "Alpha, these are serious accusations. If true, they're true." A guard captain stepped forward. "I personally witnessed the Luna adding powder to her wine cup before entering the hall. I was prepared to intervene if she'd attempted to drink it." Vivian's composure shattered completely. She launched to her feet, ice-blue eyes blazing with fury that transformed her beautiful face into something ugly. You dare judge me? I am Luna of this pack, daughter of Alpha Thaddeus Fairchild. That girl was nothing, a broken servant who deserved every moment of pain I gave her. The admission rang through the hall, damning in its clarity. She deserved it because you looked at her. Vivian continued, too far gone to stop now. 3 seconds, Declan. You looked at her for 3 seconds, and I saw it. The interest in your eyes, the way your wolf recognized something. So I took her from you. I broke her piece by piece, day by day, year after year, until there was nothing left that could threaten my position. You tortured an innocent woman for 4 years and 9 months because of 3 seconds of casual notice. Declan's voice was deadly quiet. You murdered servants who tried to help her. You hired mercenaries to eliminate her before she could testify. You violated every code of honor a Luna is sworn to uphold. Honor, Vivian laughed, the sound brittle and desperate. You want to talk about honor when you're clearly besotted with a former slave? This entire investigation is just you, justifying your desire to replace me with someone younger, more broken, easier to control. That's enough. The new voice cut through Vivian's tirade, cold and authoritative. Alpha Thaddeus Fairchild strode into the hall, his silver-streaked hair and stern features marking him clearly as Vivian's father. Behind him came several Fairchild warriors, their presence causing immediate tension. Father? Vivian's expression transformed to relief. Thank the gods. Tell them this is madness. Tell them, I received word 2 hours ago of tonight's proceedings. Thaddeus interrupted, his face carved from stone. I came immediately because I needed to hear with my own ears whether my daughter had truly brought such shame upon our bloodline. He approached the high table and Declan noted how the older Alpha's eyes didn't quite meet Vivian's desperate gaze. I heard her confession, Thaddeus said quietly. Every word. I was waiting outside the hall to make a proper entrance, and instead I heard my daughter admit to years of torture, to murder, to betrayal of the Luna's sacred duties. He finally looked at Vivian, and his expression held nothing but cold disappointment. You are no child of mine. Father, no. The Fairchild family hereby severs all ties with Vivian Fairchild. We disavow her actions, her crimes, and her very existence. She speaks only for herself, not for our territory or our bloodline. Thaddeus turned to Declan. Alpha Stone, on behalf of my territory, I formally apologize for the monster we sent to your lands. We offer no defense of her actions and will not contest whatever judgment you pass. The political maneuvering was brilliant in its cruelty. By disowning Vivian publicly, Thaddeus saved his family's reputation and eliminated any justification for war. He'd sacrificed his daughter to protect his territory's standing. Vivian stood frozen, betrayed by the very father she'd relied on to shield her from consequences. You're abandoning me. You abandoned honor. You abandoned decency. You brought shame upon everything our family stands for. Thaddeus's voice was flat, final. Whatever happens to you now, you've earned. The council elder rose with grave formality. Vivian Fairchild, formerly of Iron Peak, this council finds you guilty of systematic abuse of a pack member, of murder through negligence and intent, of violation of the Luna's Code of Honor, and of attempted poisoning with malicious intent. You are hereby stripped of all titles, all rights, and all protection under pack law. You are banished from this territory, effective immediately. Declan stood, his next words carrying the weight of Alpha command. Furthermore, I invoke my right to annul this marriage on grounds of fraud. You concealed your true nature, violated your sacred vows, and betrayed everything a mate bond should represent. We were never truly wed, only legally bound. That bond is now severed. Vivian swayed, her world crumbling around her. Where am I supposed to go? You can't just... You should have thought of that before you destroyed innocent lives. Declan gestured to the guards. Remove her from my sight. Give her 1-horse basic supplies and escort her to the border. After that, she is no longer our concern. As guards approached, Vivian's mask reformed one final time, fury and hatred replacing desperation. She looked at Declan with pure venom. You'll regret this. The broken girl you're protecting will never be whole enough to be Luna. She'll fail you just as I apparently failed to kill her properly. The only thing I regret, Declan said softly, is that it took me so long to see you for what you truly are. They dragged her from the hall. her screams of fury echoing off stone walls until distance finally muted them. The assembled pack remained in shocked silence, processing everything they'd witnessed. After the crowd dispersed, Declan went immediately to find Rowan. She stood at the window of her quarters, having heard the distant commotion, but not knowing what had transpired. When he entered, she turned with weighted amber eyes. "It's over," he said simply. "What happened?" Vivian confessed. In front of the entire pack, she admitted everything. Her father disowned her publicly. The council banished her. The marriage is annulled. He crossed to her in 3 strides. "You're free, Rowan, truly free." The words seemed to take a moment to penetrate. Then her legs gave out and Declan caught her before she hit the floor, holding her as she finally broke great racking sobs that had been held back for 4 years and 9 months, spilling out all at once. "You're safe now," he murmured, pulling her close against his chest. "It's over. She can never touch you again. I promise, Rowan." They stayed like that for long minutes, her tears soaking his shirt while he held her safe. And somewhere in those moments, both their wolves hummed with recognition that this was right, this was meant, this was home. 3 weeks passed in careful healing. Rowan worked daily with Meredith. The healer sessions focused on unlocking the wolf that had been trapped for a decade. The process was painful, requiring her to revisit memories she'd spent years trying to forget. But this time she didn't face them alone. Declan attended every session, a steady presence at her back. When panic attacks threatened to overwhelm her, his voice anchored her. When the pain of attempted transformation became too much, his hand on her shoulder reminded her she was safe. "Tell me about your mother," Meredith prompted gently one evening. "Not about how she died, about how she lived." Rowan's voice was barely a whisper at first. "She used to sing while she worked, old songs from her grandmother's pack. I didn't understand all the words, but the melody was beautiful." Her eyes drifted closed. "She smelled like pine needles and bread. She always had flour on her hands." "Good. And your father?" "He was patient, so patient. He taught me to track by scent when I was 6. We'd spend hours in the forest, and he never got frustrated when I made mistakes." A small smile curved Rowan's lips. He had this deep laugh that made his whole body shake. "Now remember the night they died. Not the violence, the love. They fought to protect you. They wanted you to survive." Rowan's breathing quickened, her hands clenching into fists. Inside her chest, her wolf stirred, not with the violent desperation of the past, but with purpose, with recognition of what had been lost and what remained. "They loved you enough to die for you," Meredith continued. "Your wolf tried to emerge that night to protect them. It's been waiting ever since, trying to honor their sacrifice. Let it out, Rowan. Let it be free." Something inside her fractured, not painfully, but like ice melting after a long winter. Her wolf surged forward, and this time when Rowan reached for the transformation, the barriers didn't slam shut. They dissolved. Her eyes blazed amber gold, claws extended from her fingertips. Fangs pushed past her lips. It wasn't a complete shift, but it was the farthest she'd gotten in 10 years. Her wolf was there, present and aware, no longer trapped behind walls of trauma. Behind her, Declan's own wolf responded instantly, recognizing hers with a soul-deep certainty that made his breath catch. The connection wasn't just attraction or affection, it was fate. True mate. The bond his kind rarely found but always yearned for. Rowan opened her eyes, amber fading back to human awareness, but with her wolf now accessible, tangible, real. "I did it?" she gasped. "Declan, I did it?" He was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms, holding her as she laughed and cried simultaneously. His wolf hummed with contentment, finally allowed to be close to its mate, finally able to protect and cherish what belonged to it. "I'm so proud of you," he murmured into her hair, meaning every word. The full transformation came during a thunderstorm 2 nights later. Rowan woke to lightning illuminating her quarters, thunder crashing overhead. For a moment, she was 14 again, rogues breaking down the door, her parents shifting to defend their home, blood and death and terror. But then Declan was there, having sensed her distress through their deepening bond. He pulled her against his chest, one hand stroking her hair, while the other held her steady. "You're safe," he said with quiet certainty. "I'm here. Nothing will hurt you." As the storm raged outside, something shifted inside Rowan. The memories that had trapped her wolf for 10 years began to lose their power. Her parents hadn't died so she could live in fear. They died so she could live fully freely without the chains of trauma holding her back. They wanted me to survive, she whispered, but they also wanted me to thrive. Her wolf surged forward with sudden clarity, and this time Rowan didn't fight it. She let the transformation take her, let her body reshape with pain that felt more like release than agony. Bones reformed, fur erupted across her skin, her senses sharpened to impossible clarity. And then she stood on four legs for the first time in 10 years, a sleek, dark wolf with amber eyes that gleamed with intelligence and hard-won strength. Declan shifted beside her, his massive black wolf nuzzling against hers with tender affection. They were different sizes, different builds, but perfectly matched. His strength complemented her speed. His power balanced her agility. They ran through the territory that night, two wolves moving as one, the bond between them singing with rightness. Rain soaked their fur, but Rowan had never felt more alive, more whole, more free. When they returned to human form at dawn, tangled in his bed with the first light creeping through windows, Rowan touched the spot on her throat where his claiming bite would eventually go. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "Family, love, freedom. You have all of it now," Declan promised, pulling her closer, "and I will spend every day making sure you never forget it." In the days that followed, Declan faced mounting pressure from the council about securing a new Luna. Political marriages were proposed with alarming frequency, alliances that would strengthen trade routes, settle border disputes, demonstrate Iron Peak's continued power despite the scandal. He refused every single suggestion. "I will choose my mate when I'm ready," he told the council with finality that brooked no argument. "This pack is stable. Our alliances remain intact. There is no urgency that justifies another loveless political arrangement." What he didn't say, but what his wolf knew with absolute certainty, was that he'd already found his mate. She just needed time to heal before he could court her properly, before she could choose freely without the shadow of Vivian's abuse coloring every decision. He visited Rowan daily, always careful to maintain enough distance that she wouldn't feel pressured or trapped. They talked about everything and nothing pack politics, her progress with the Meredith, memories of her parents, his frustrations with council interference. The connection between them deepened with each conversation, comfortable in ways his marriage had never been. "The council wants you to choose a new Luna," Rowan said one evening as they sat in the castle gardens 3 weeks after Vivian's banishment. "I hear the servants talking. They're proposing matches from half a dozen territories. The council can want whatever they like. I'm not interested in political marriages anymore." Declan's gray eyes found hers. "I've spent 5 years in a union built on duty and alliance. It taught me that power without affection is a cage, no matter how gilded." "What will you do?" "Wait," he said simply, "for someone who chooses me freely, not because of treaties or territory, for a bond built on trust and respect, not convenience and calculation." Rowan's heart beat faster. "And if you're waiting a long time, then I wait." Declan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. Things are worth waiting for, Rowan. You taught me that." A month after Vivian's banishment, word spread through the territories about what had happened at Iron Peak. Some alphas expressed quiet approval. Vivian Howe's crimes were undeniable and justice had been served. Others whispered that Declan had overreached, that he'd destabilized his pack for the sake of a broken servant. But then reports began filtering back. Vivian had been spotted begging for positions at various pack territories, her reputation preceding her. No respectable alpha would risk the scandal of harboring someone with her documented history of abuse and attempted murder. She'd become a rogue wandering between territories, unwanted and unprotected. "Is it wrong that I don't feel pity for her?" Rowan asked Declan one evening after they'd received another report of Vivian being turned away from yet another pack. "It's honest," Declan said. "She made her choices. She hurt people systematically and without remorse. The consequences she faces now are the direct result of her actions." "I spent so long thinking I deserved what she did to me," Rowan admitted quietly. "That somehow I'd provoked her, or that I was too weak to fight back, or that my broken wolf made me less worthy of protection. You know better now." "I'm learning to know better. There's a difference." She looked at him, amber eyes serious. "You helped me see that survival isn't the same as living, that enduring isn't the same as thriving. But knowing it intellectually and believing it in my bones, that takes time." Then we have time, Declan said. However much you need. 2 months after Vivienne's banishment, Rowan stood before the council for the first time not as a servant, not as a victim, but as herself. Declan had invited her to observe a session about pack resource allocation, curious to hear her perspective. She listened quietly as the elders debated grain stores and winter preparations, supply routes and trade agreements. Then when they began discussing servant housing improvements that Declan had proposed, she spoke. May I offer input, Alpha? Every head turned toward her. Declan nodded, encouraging. The proposed improvements are good, Rowan said, her voice steady despite the attention. But they don't address the core issue. Better housing helps, but what prevents abuse is accountability. Servants need a way to report mistreatment directly to leadership without fear of retaliation. They need regular health checks by someone who isn't beholden to their supervisors. They need to know that their welfare matters to this pack. The council members exchanged glances. An older elder spoke. You're suggesting we create an entirely new administrative system for servant oversight. I'm suggesting we make it clear that abuse of power will not be tolerated at any level of this pack. Rowan's amber eyes were fierce. Luna Vivian wasn't an anomaly. She was what happens when those with power believe they can act without consequences. Change the system and you prevent the next Vivian. Silence fell across the chamber. Then Declan spoke. The Luna makes an excellent point. She's not Luna Alpha, the elder said carefully. She's the person who saved 40 lives with her gift. Declan interrupted. She's a pack member who survived years of systematic torture and came out stronger. She's someone whose perspective on these matters carries more weight than anyone else in this room. I propose we implement her suggestions and establish a formal welfare council to oversee servant treatment and investigate complaints. The vote passed with clear majority. After the meeting, Rowan found Declan in the corridor. You called me Luna, she said quietly. Did I? His expression was carefully neutral. Must have been a slip of the tongue. Declan? Or perhaps, he continued, his gray eyes warming, it was my wolf getting ahead of itself, recognizing what it wants before I've properly courted you or given you the chance to choose freely. Rowan's breath caught. And what does your wolf want? You, he said simply, as my mate, as my Luna, as my equal and partner in leading this pack. But only if that's what you want too. Only if you're ready. Only if you choose it freely without pressure or obligation. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I know how to be Luna. I barely know how to be free. Then we'll learn together, Declan said, echoing words he'd spoken before. One day at a time. No pressure, just possibility. The next morning, Rowan sought out Agnes in the kitchens. The old cook looked up from kneading dough, her weathered face breaking into a smile. There's my lamb. You look well today. Rowan crossed to her, suddenly unsure how to put into words everything she felt. I have news. Agnes's hands stilled. She set down the dough and wiped her flour-dusted palms on her apron, her eyes never leaving Rowan's face. What kind of news? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Then Agnes's eyes filled with tears and she opened her arms. Rowan fell into the embrace, breathing in the scent of flour and herbs and home. From the girl who couldn't speak for weeks, Agnes whispered, to the Luna who gives voice to the voiceless. She pulled back, cupping Rowan's face with gentle hands. Your parents couldn't have dreamed of this, but they would be so, so proud. I couldn't have survived without you, Rowan said, her own tears falling freely now. You gave me sanctuary when I had nothing. You protected me as much as you could. You taught me that kindness still existed in the world. No, lamb, Agnes shook her head. You survived because of the strength your parents gave you. I just kept you fed until you remembered how to use it. She smiled through her tears. But I'm honored to have been part of your journey, and I'll be here for whatever comes next. That evening, Rowan told Declan about the pregnancy. They stood together at the window of his chambers. Their chambers now, though she was still getting used to thinking of them that way, watching the sun set over the territory. I'm pregnant, she said quietly, about 8 weeks. Declan's arms came around her from behind one hand, spreading across her still flat abdomen with reverent care. Are you afraid? She'd expected the question. After years of abuse and trauma, pregnancy represented vulnerability she'd once never imagined surviving. But she'd also spent months healing, learning to trust her own strength and the safety Declan provided. No, she said honestly, I'm not afraid, not anymore. I'm hopeful, excited, ready to build something new. A family, Declan murmured against her hair. Our family. They announced the pregnancy to a small gathering that night. Brennan raised his cup in a solemn toast. To the future heir of Iron Peak, may they inherit their mother's wisdom and their father's strength. The months that followed settled into a rhythm Rowan had never imagined possible. Her body changed with pregnancy, growing round with new life, while the pack thrived under reforms she'd helped implement. Each morning brought new challenges, supply chain negotiations, diplomatic correspondence with allied territories, training sessions with young warriors eager to learn threat detection from her rare gift. She was learning what it meant to build rather than merely survive, to create legacy rather than simply endure another day. The claiming ceremony took place under a full moon 6 months after Vivian's banishment. The entire pack gathered in the ceremonial grounds, torches illuminating a circle of ancient stones that had witnessed countless matings over generations. Rowan stood at the center in a simple white dress, her pregnant belly visible, but not yet cumbersome, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Declan faced her dressed in formal alpha regalia, but his gray eyes held only warmth and love. I call this pack to witness, he said, his voice carrying across the assembled shifters. 6 months ago, I failed to see evil wearing beauty's mask. I was blind to suffering in my own territory. I let politics and duty cloud my judgment, and an innocent woman paid the price for my blindness. He turned to address the crowd directly. Rowan Ashford survived 4 years and 9 months of systematic torture. She endured pain that would break trained warriors. She saved 40 lives with a gift she didn't even know she possessed. She carries rare bloodline abilities and warrior spirit that this pack is honored to claim. Turning back to Rowan, Declan dropped to one knee, a shocking breach of alpha protocol that made the crowd gasp. Rowan, you are my true mate. My wolf knew it from the moment our eyes met, and my heart has learned it in the months since. I'm asking you now before witnesses, not because protocol demands it, but because I want you to have the choice that was stolen from you for so long. He took her hand. Will you be my Luna? Not from duty or politics, but because we choose each other. Rowan looked down at him, this powerful alpha kneeling before her, offering not just his position, but his heart. She thought of the girl she'd been broke, silent, convinced she was worthless. And she thought of the woman she'd become strong, vocal, carrying new life within her. For 10 years I've been a shadow, she said, her voice clear and steady. For nearly 5 years I was a victim. Tonight I choose to be more than either of those things. She pulled him to his feet, meeting his gaze with confidence she'd earned through suffering and healing. Yes, I choose you. I choose this pack. I choose to live fully and love freely. I choose us. The pack erupted in cheers, genuine this time, wholehearted approval from shifters who'd watched Rowan's transformation and recognized her worth. The claiming itself was sacred and simple. Declan's teeth marked her throat in the traditional Luna's claiming, and Rowan's bite on his neck completed the bond equals, not possession. When their teeth broke, skin golden light flared between them, visible to every witness, undeniable proof of the true mate bond. Her wolf rose to the surface with joyous recognition, no longer blocked or silent but fully present. The partial shift came easily now, her eyes blazing amber gold claws and fangs extending as her wolf celebrated the bond with its mate. Then for the first time before witnesses, Rowan completed her full transformation. The shift flowed through her like water, natural, and right after 10 years of being blocked. Bones reshaped. Fur erupted across her skin, dark and sleek, catching moonlight like shadow made solid. She stood on 4 legs smaller than Declan's wolf, but fast and intelligent, built for speed and precision rather than raw power. Declan shifted beside her, his massive black wolf dwarfing hers, but moving with careful gentleness as he nuzzled her neck. They were perfectly matched despite their size difference, his strength protecting her speed, her agility complementing his power. The pack howled approval, their voices rising to the moon in symphony. And Rowan added her voice to theirs, her first true howl in a decade, carrying not grief, but triumph, not pain, but joy. They ran through the territory that night, 2 wolves moving as one, the mate bond between them shining like a beacon. When they returned to human form at dawn, Rowan bore the Luna's mark proudly and carried their pup with confidence that she would bring new life into a world she'd help make safer. 3 months later, Rowan stood before the full council with a proposal that would change pack dynamics across multiple territories. No Luna in allied territories will abuse their people unchallenged. She declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned her position through suffering and strength. We will provide sanctuary for victims. We will investigate credible accusations. We will hold leaders accountable to the codes they swore to uphold. An elder spoke up carefully. Luna, this will create political complications. Other alphas may view it as interference in their territories. Then let them view it as such. Rowan's amber eyes were fierce with conviction. She placed one hand on her swollen belly, feeling their pup kick as if in agreement. We stand for honor, not silence. For justice, not convenience. And if that makes us unpopular, so be it. Declan stood beside her, solid and unwavering in his support. My Luna speaks with my full backing. This is now Iron Peak's official position. Any territory that wishes to trade with us or claim our alliance will be expected to maintain basic standards of treatment for those under their authority. The vote passed with clear majority. Word would spread through the territories Iron Peak had drawn a line in the snow, and anyone who crossed it would face consequences. That evening, as Rowan and Declan walked through their territory under the full moon, she felt the weight of purpose settle over her shoulders like a mantle. She was 8 months pregnant now, moving more slowly but no less determined. Are you ready for what comes next? Declan asked, his hand resting protectively on her belly, where their pup grew strong. This sanctuary system will bring challenges, resistance from other alphas, political complications, former victims arriving at our gates with trauma and needs we'll have to meet. I'm ready, Rowan said with certainty, because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go, no one to believe you, no way out. If we can be that way out for even one person, everything I survived will have meant something. It already means something, Declan said softly. You transformed pain into purpose. You took suffering that could have destroyed you and used it to build something better. That's not just survival, that's victory. They shifted together as the moon climbed higher, two wolves running through territory they'd sworn to protect. Behind them, the castle stood as a beacon, not of power through fear, but of justice through wisdom. And in the newly established guest quarters, 3 more women who'd fled abusive Lunas slept safely knowing they'd found sanctuary at last. The pup arrived on a crisp autumn morning, her first cry strong and healthy. Rowan held her daughter close, counting tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the miracle of new life, born from the ashes of old pain. She has your eyes, Declan said, his voice rough with emotion as he gazed at his daughter. Amber like honey in sunlight. And your strength, Rowan murmured. I can feel it already. She's going to be formidable. They named her Ember for the fire that had forged her mother, for the light that would guide her path, for the warmth she brought to a pack that had learned to value compassion alongside strength. Agnes held the baby with practiced ease, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. From the broken girl in the forest to this, she whispered. The gods have strange ways of working justice, but when they do, it's beautiful. On the evening of Ember's naming ceremony, Rowan stood before the assembled pack with her daughter in her arms and Declan at her side. She looked out across faces that had once dismissed her, that now regarded her with genuine respect, earned through courage and wisdom. This pack saved my life, she said simply. Not all at once and not without cost. But Agnes gave me sanctuary. Alpha Declan gave me justice. Meredith gave me healing. And all of you, by witnessing truth and choosing honor, gave me hope that change is possible. She lifted Ember, slightly, the baby blinking sleepily in the torchlight. My daughter will grow up in a world where abuse is challenged, where victims are believed, where power comes with accountability. She'll know her mother survived hell and use that survival to build something better. And she'll learn that scars aren't marks of shame, they're proof of strength. The pack's howls rose in approval, welcoming their heir, celebrating their Luna, recognizing the transformation that had taken root in Iron Peak. That night after the ceremonies ended, and Ember slept peacefully in her cradle, Rowan visited her parents' graves for the first time since becoming Luna. The modest markers stood in the territory's memorial grove, tended now by pack custom and Luna's orders. She knelt between them, her hand resting on stone carved with her mother's name. I kept my promise, Mama, she said softly. I survived. But I did so much more than that. I found purpose, love pack. I'm not just existing anymore. I'm living, really living. She touched her father's marker next. And Papa, I'm using the strength you gave me to protect others. The way you protected me that night, even though it cost you everything. Her wolf stirred inside her, no longer trapped or silent, but fully integrated part of her as naturally as breathing. The creature had been freed not just by healing, but by purpose, by love, by the choice to transform pain into power. She howled softly, a tribute to the parents she'd lost, and across the territory, her mate's answering call rose to meet hers, a promise that she would never face darkness alone again. 3 months after Ember's birth, a young woman arrived at Iron Peak's gates in the middle of the night. She was beaten, starving, barely able to stand. The guards brought her to Rowan immediately. The Luna met her in the comfortable guest quarters that had been prepared for exactly this purpose. The girl, she couldn't have been more than 19, flinched when Rowan entered, expecting judgment or dismissal. Instead, Rowan sat across from her and rolled up her sleeves, revealing faded scars that still marked her arms. My name is Rowan Ashford, she said gently. I was tortured for 4 years and 9 months by my former Luna. I know exactly what you've been through. She met the girl's haunted gaze with steady compassion. And I promise you it ends here. You're safe now. The girl stared at those scars, then at Rowan's face, at the Luna mark on her throat, the confidence in her bearing the genuine understanding in her amber eyes. And something inside her broke with relief. I didn't think anyone would believe me, she whispered. I believe you, Rowan said firmly. We all do. And more than that, we're going to make sure the Luna who hurt you faces consequences. You're not just finding sanctuary here. You're finding justice. As she held the girl while she wept, Rowan thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a 14-year-old orphan watching her parents die, to a servant bearing abuse in silence, to a condemned prisoner facing execution, to a Luna powerful enough to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The scars would always be there, faded now but present. A map of where she'd been, a testament to what she'd overcome, and a promise to those who came after that healing was possible, that justice could prevail, that broken things could be made whole again. In the distance, a wolf's howl rose into the night, another victim seeking Iron Peak's sanctuary, another soul finding hope in the darkness. And Rowan answered that call with her own voice, strong and clear and unafraid, welcoming them home. The shadow had become the light, and the broken servant girl who'd once believed she was worthless now stood as proof that survival was only the beginning. The real victory came in choosing to live fully, love deeply, and fight fiercely for those who couldn't yet fight for themselves. Her daughter would grow up knowing this truth. Her pack would live by this standard. Her legacy would echo through generations, not as a victim who endured, but as a survivor who thrived, as a leader who transformed suffering into sanctuary, as a Luna who proved that even the darkest cages could be broken from within. Rowan Ashford had kept her mother's final command. She had survived. But more than that, she had lived. And in living, she had set countless others free.